I think he ended up coming on in here. There's Todd back there. Todd told me, he says, there's no need to be nervous around here. He said, Sarah, there's a bunch of miners out there. It's just like being in Alaska. All right, our people. Speaking of Alaska, it's really nice to be here in the Big Easy where we're thawing out. There in Alaska, it's already winter time. My friend Tom Irwin is here from Fairbanks working on a lighted good mine up there, gold mine, and I Googled the temp up there. It was like 4 or 5 below already, and it's snowing. And you know that you're real Alaskan this time of year when your children are planning their Halloween costumes to fit over their snowsuits. That's the way it rolls up there. And speaking of Halloween, I don't know if you guys are going to be celebrating and dressing up as anything, but Jay Leno had a good idea the other night. He said, what you can do for Halloween is maybe pin a button on you that says, re-elect Obama and go as a journalist. That's right. Nowadays, yes it is. It is so good to be here, though, among entrepreneurs, those who are making things happen in this country, despite what maybe government is doing to you and the agencies doing to you. You're making things happen anyway. And I think it's no accident, no coincidence. I don't really believe that there is such a thing as coincidence, but here we are in a state where the state motto enveloping you here today, which I hope will encourage you, it is union, justice, confidence. Those are the things that we need today, that you all need in your businesses, in your industries, as we try and move this country forward and make some good decisions, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, to make sure that we put this country back on the right track. You, who are the entrepreneurs, who are hardworking Americans, really, this afternoon, as we partook in the panel discussing some of the current affairs in our State of the Union, and one of the panelists was describing the real State of the Union now, where there are so many people in the wagon and not enough people pulling the wagon. You are pulling the wagon, and we want to make sure that others in America can look to you and see success, see fulfillment, see that work ethic really lived out, so that more will desire to be pulling the wagon. And then that evens the playing field. That allows true opportunity for prosperity for all, for success for all. And it is people like you who are part of that solution to the problems facing America today. So I want to pat you on the back and remind you that you are the unsung heroes of American greatness. Ronald Reagan said that entrepreneurs are the explorers of the modern era, because men and women with vision, you are the men and women with vision and with courage to take the risks. And you have the faith to brave the unknown. And our continued prosperity relies on this, relies on you. America's security relies on you. Over the last 4 years, I know that many of you have faced what I call the entrepreneur's dilemma. And it's a dilemma brought about by what we're seeing government do to us. It's tax uncertainty, it's excessive and ever-changing regulation, it's slow growth, and no real capital formation. We now have the dubious distinction of having the highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world. We have choices as to whether we want to continue to be known as having the highest corporate tax rate in the world, making us less competitive. Presidential candidates is really too close to call, but I'll tell you, when the liberal media calls a race a toss-up, that usually means things aren't looking too good for the liberal. So there is light at the end of the tunnel for those of us who know that we have got to turn some things around. We've got to get this economy roaring again, and we can do that. There are serious issues confronting us today. The first is our need to reduce the size and the scope of an out-of-control and out-of-touch, quite burdensome federal government. The second is confronting our massive debt. And I think we need to have a come-to-Jesus moment on both of those. Gets a little bit, not depressing, but a little bit of a bummer talking about what the problems are. And I know that so many of you already recognize what the problems are. We'll get to the solutions, but just in case anybody anybody's forgotten. We're going to talk about some of those problems, how we got there. On the size of government, go back just a few months to the Democrat National Convention. I don't think that I've ever seen the left define so candidly what it is that is their belief as they defined it there at the DNC. Opening up with a video declaring that government is the only thing we all belong to. Good Lord, I don't belong to government. Government is not my family, it's not my faith, it's not my community.
Amen.
It's about taking genuine responsibility and care for your fellow countrymen, not outsourcing responsibility to inefficient big government. Community requires individual empowerment and individual initiative. Community is freely chosen, and it's voluntarily and joyfully generous. We build communities, not government. And for too long, the far left has fused and confused government with community. And yet, ironically, their policies have harmed our communities by undermining our religious institutions and protecting failed schools and removing measures to fight crime and warehousing our God-given natural resources instead of developing them. And just making it more difficult for our small businesses to start up and to hire people. Family, faith, charity. These are also important to a society. And they have nothing to do with government, though. Honor, duty, compassion have nothing to do with government. Yet these are the qualities and the behaviors that make a civil society, which undergirds a government. When centralized government grows too big, it actually turns on the individual and it coerces him and ultimately destroys him by stripping freedoms and bankrupting the country. And that's why our founders believe that only limited government can safeguard our individual liberty. That is why we must reduce the size and the scope of our federal government if we wish to preserve our liberty. Today, our federal government has grown beyond anyone's control, and it no longer feels like government of, by, for the people. Instead, it feels like government of, by, and for the permanent political class in Washington, D.C. The divide between Washington and the rest of America has never seemed to be so great, and it certainly has never been more dangerous. You notice that while the heartland struggles, while the rest of America struggles, Washington prospers. While America's real estate markets decline, 30% of our mortgages are underwater. While Washington's real estate market is robust. While Americans suffer massive job losses, 1 out of every 5 working-age men can't find a job, while Washington is hiring. But hiring for what? If you think about it, they don't manufacture, they don't mine, they don't drill, they don't harvest, they produce nothing. And the services that they do provide, they increase dependency, not freedom. They don't create wealth, they take it. This is the new Washington. It is not the Washington that our founders had ever envisioned. It's of the permanent political class today. It's something that our forefathers never envisioned, and they would have sworn their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor to change. You know, when he left office, Thomas Jefferson said, "I have the consolation of having added nothing to my private fortune during my public service, and of retiring with hands as clean as they are empty." That was the Washington of our founders. But the new? Well, it borders on 7 of the 10 wealthiest counties in the nation, and now it is home to the highest per capita income. It seems that they take our hard-earned tax dollars, they mortgage our kids' future, and they put us on the road to bankruptcy while they get rich off of us. Where is the urgency there in changing any of that and turning that around? There doesn't seem to be an urgency because there, life is good. It's really good. Too content because they're immune to the economic realities that the rest of us face. They live by a different set of rules. Take the EPA, for instance. Please, take the EPA. Take the EPA and what's been going on there, especially as of late. My goodness, it hampers the private industry. It thwarts our domestic energy development opportunities and our security. But when was the last time you saw the EPA prevent the construction of, say, a new government building? Well, maybe instead of calling D.C. a swamp, we should call it a wetland. Maybe then we can help It's the old Washington. It was, of our founders, a place where you came to serve your government, not prosper off of it. You left your home and your farm and your industry to serve the common good. But the new Washington is where politicians, do you notice they arrive as men and women quite often of just modest means, and they leave as millionaires. And it's not just the money-making opportunities for the politicians themselves. The rich in themselves, no, they seem to like to spread the wealth around to their pals, too. And this is called crony capitalism. It's not the capitalism that you are engaged in. It's not the capitalism of free men and free markets, of innovation and hard work, of sacrifice and risk. This is the capitalism of connections and government bailouts and handouts. It's influence peddling and corporate welfare. This is the capitalism of the permanent political class, and it's a root cause of our economic problems. It's spurred by the expansion of government, and it spurs more growth of government, which in turn diminishes freedom. That diminishes opportunity for all to rise and to thrive and to succeed. See, some politicians get elected by promising more programs and more free stuff and favors, and then government inevitably grows to fulfill those promises of the politicians. And that crowds out the liberating individual initiative and the equal opportunity that America was built upon. It swallows up the work ethic that we're trying to teach our children, and it extinguishes our independent, pioneering American spirit. Too often, I hear politicos arriving in D.C. denouncing the place as a cesspool of corruption. But it seems like after a year or two of being there, they decide, nah, it's not really cesspool. It's more like a hot tub. For the good of our republic, it's time to drain the jacuzzi. It's got to stop. It's got to stop. And the answer lies with each of us. Not with big centralized faraway government. It's with each of us. The solution to ending this is to downsize and even outsource a lot of D.C. We've got to make government not just smaller, but more local. I talked today on the panel about local government being the most responsive and responsible. And you learn that by being involved, growing up in a small community and knowing you can make a difference without a title, without an office, and then maybe you serve in local office. You go knocking on doors and you ask to be hired as a leader in your community, maybe running for city council, and then mayor, served as manager of our city, and then went on in oil and gas commission, and then became governor. And the things that I did when you start out in a local office, man, you never forget how important it is to realize it's a sacred trust that the voter gives you when they give you that vote, when they hire you to, one, spend their money. You better do it wisely, and you're held accountable on a local level. That's why it's so important, I think, for our politicians on such a level, the federal level, to perhaps have served in local office, so that in those training grounds, they, on the front lines, knew who it was that they were working for, knew to be held accountable, knew what a sacred trust that vote is. We have to make government not just smaller, but more local. That's what will make it responsive and responsible. Just gotta start using common sense in there. My husband says, though, it seems like up there in Washington, D.C., that those with common sense are an endangered species. And I think Todd, who has more common sense in his middle finger, and his little finger, what it is that they are enjoying today. It's people like us, people like you, who I certainly wish your voices could be heard more clearly, louder by the politicians who are in charge of things today, because it's all about common sense solutions. We're going to talk about some of the common sense solutions that are needed to get us out of the problems I just described. Our bloated federal government is maintained by that culture I described in Washington, D.C. today. So we have to look for reform solutions that break up that culture. And again, as entrepreneurs, please help. Our country needs your entrepreneurial thinking and your work ethic now more than ever. The solution is to decentralize D.C.'s power, return responsibility to the states, respecting that 10th Amendment. You can ask yourself, why is it anyway that every federal agency has to be headquartered in the Beltway? Why not allow states to house the services, and that way we can crack down on inefficiencies and the duplication that we know is rampant in the federal government? Move them out of there. You can think of it this way: when you're moving into a new home, what you do is you load up the truck and you jump the unnecessary stuff that you've accumulated over the years. So relocating some bureaucracy necessarily would involve streamlining and downsizing. I could break up this DC playground of the permanent political class, and I think it'd go a long way toward breaking up the culture of corruption and a big government. Have a little bit of experience in this. Now, Tom Irwin, who's my commissioner of our Department of Natural Resources, he's here tonight. Where is Tom? He is working on, there's Tom back there. He's working on some mining projects right now with International Tower Hills Mine. And when Tom Irwin and I put together our team to develop Alaska's natural resources in order to help secure our union, let me give you a little background first about Alaska. We have Abraham Lincoln to thank for Alaska, because it was his cabinet, his Secretary of State, William Seward. Amen. Seward recognized that this territory of Alaska would someday be used to help secure our union because of the natural resources and the very strategic location of that land mass that was up there up north. So Seward secured it, purchased it from Russia, which you can see in Alaska. Between the two, right? Back in '87, she swam between Alaska and Russia. Maybe that's what I need to do, so that, maybe the media then would follow the course and see that, yeah, you can actually see it. But so Seward recognized how valuable this land mass, full of natural resources called Alaska, would be. And remember, Abraham Lincoln's mission was to reunite the Union, was to secure it. Well, they looked at Alaska, back then it was our fisheries and our waterways, transportation corridors. Now we see that it is minerals, that it is our oil, that it is our natural gas, as more of that contribution to the natural resources that we need to tap into in order to secure our union. Alaska being so important. So that's why I ran for governor. We had corruption up in Alaska, in Juneau, our state capital, because too many politicians in Juneau were not being held accountable because things were so far away from the population center. So Tom Irwin and I, putting together our team, we said we're going to clean up the unethical behavior of some in Juneau. In Juneau, Alaska, too. You can't get to our state capital unless you fly in an airplane or take a boat. There's no road to even get there. So Juneau had the reputation of, I suppose it's a lot like Washington, D.C. It's kind of like a frat house. Being in Juneau, where college freshmen get there away from their parents for the first time, and there was all the typical woohoo, partying and drinking and affairs and all that. Again, probably a lot like D.C. And the remoteness, though, prohibiting that watchful eye of the people over their elected representatives. There was a culture of corruption up there. Okay. Legislators and businessmen in our big industries ended up going to prison over vote buying and selling. It was disgusting. And I was the mayor of the fastest growing area in our state. Some studies showed us to be the fastest growing area in the entire Northwest, because we were cutting taxes left and right so the businesses would come in and paying common sense like things like that. It actually works. Cut the taxes, attract more business, and then our little the next town where they had a tax. growing, of course, with more revenue being generated, just because more businesses were coming in, and now we have zero property tax there in our city. And anyway, just common sense measures that as far as mayor, but I was watching what was going on, and I became the president of the conference of mayors up there, so working with other mayors around the state, watching what was going on in our state capitol and saying, it's not unacceptable what's going on. We're going to get there to clean it up. So Tom and I formed a team, and I'll tell you how popular we were. Well, for one, neither one of us are there, are we, Tom? We moved on into the private sector after that probably is an indication of how popular we were. With those who did not want to see the sudden and relentless reform that we knew had to take place in order to clean up the corruption that we saw there in Alaska, in order for Alaska to be trusted, so that we could contribute to the rest of the U.S., so that we could fulfill our destiny, which, as Seward, as Lincoln had recognized, would someday be Alaska contributing to the rest of the U.S. to secure us, so we don't have to be reliant on foreign countries to supply energy for us. Anwar is still sitting up there untapped, and it should be tapped because we can do it safely. The National Petroleum Reserve, they set that aside decades ago, the government did, to tap for oil, for natural gas. It's still sitting up there. Obama's locking up more and more of it, and yet Alaska was chosen as a state, eventually becoming the 49th state, so that we could contribute with our natural resources. So that was our mission up there. I'll tell you how popular we were, though. Somebody in high-ranking in one of the big industries up there wrote Tom Irwin a letter, and I read it. I'm like, Tom, we gotta wear this as a badge of honor. It said, that letter, I guess to sum it up, it said, go to hell, but resign first. Yeah, but we did it. We cleaned things up, and we have a good record to prove what it was that we were able to accomplish, because the people were on our side. Yeah, a lot of the self-proclaimed movers and shakers in the political arena up there perhaps weren't on our side. The media wasn't on our side because, you know, too doggone conservative, and you're not going to be a friend of the media. But that's another badge of honor. And we did accomplish much in Alaska with this team, and DC needs that sudden and relentless reform. DC needs to be outsourcing much of its power and consolidated authority. Think of the K Street lobbyists who no longer be able to seamlessly perch then on those doorstops in DC, just kind of hopping around from one agency to the next, getting their favors done. And, well, another benefit would be back to the media. It would force the media who cover these agencies to have to relocate with them when we start outsourcing more of that responsibility and power. They'd have to really work to get their stories instead of practicing their herd journalism, you know, that they kind of all get to enjoy at their Georgetown cocktail parties. I think it would be good for them to get out of DC, get out of New York City, and it would give the press a much healthier perspective. Decentralizing power could go a long way towards modernizing DC, because today the way it works is Washington relying on an old industrialized business model that demands centralization, and that is so out of touch. It's not the way business works today. It's not how things work well. Technology lets business work anywhere, cheaper and more efficiently. I just think, you know, it's our government, and we can and we must force it to think and act more entrepreneurial, the way that you all do in your businesses. See, big governments become too over-leveraged, too inward-looking, too unaccountable, and too big to control. And if that sounds familiar, it's because that's what they were saying just a few years ago about Wall Street. And that same criticism, it does apply to government. It's not too big to fail. Our government is too big to succeed. And if left unchecked, it will make America fail. It weighs down our industrial and entrepreneurial spirit until, at some point here, we are going to be a shadow of our former greatness. It will be, result will be that fundamental transformation of America that one candidate had promised. We don't need a fundamental transformation of America. We need a fundamental restoration of all that is good and strong and secure and free about America. And that will make us again an exceptional nation. You ask yourself, well, an exceptional nation, we are an exception to what? What were we to be an exception to? We are an exception to all the past forms of government that did centralize power in the hands of a few. We are not government of, by, for the ruling class. We are of, by, for, we the people. We are this form of government so exceptional because of our foundation, because of the foresight, the providential foresight of our founders. Now the rules that are being played out today, more and more, is moving us towards a massive detached government that really is ruling over us from afar. And the more that that happens, the less exceptional we become. Our founders knew that nations fell when their leaders were more interested in consolidating more power than in serving that common good. And that's why it's incumbent upon us to reduce the size and scope of government and to do all that we can with what we have individually, with our abilities, using our lot in life to restore our greatness, to do our part, to restore our freedom. That's what our brave men and women in uniform are doing for us, folks, every day. They're putting their lives on the line for us, for our freedom every day. You know, by the way, if you love your freedom, think of vets. I certainly do. Our vets, and I know that there are some of you, in fact, I ask you to raise your hand, let us know who has served in the past, or perhaps serving today in some branch of our military, and we honor you, and we thank you, and we salute you. And we thank you. We thank you. You know, speaking of those who, some of you in the military, I know because my son who's in the military, sometimes people have said, why did you enlist? Especially, he was 18 and he enlisted as an infantryman. Oh, you could have gone and done this. You could have gone and done that. There were doors open for you somewhere to do. You know, the critics were out there. Just remember, the critics are going to criticize and the haters are going to hate. If you know that your lot in life allows you to serve something greater than self, I do encourage all of you to do it. And let me give you a little story on that. Not that this example is serving anything greater than self, but let me tell you about a little funny story about the critics who will criticize anyway. You want to hear a little example, an illustration of how when you decide that you're going to ignore the critics and you're going to get out there and you're going to do what you believe you have an opportunity to do, it's good for you, you're going to do it. How that too, putting your life in God's hands to ask for direction for each step. Let me give you a story about my daughter and how God turned some morning into Dancing with the Stars. Let me tell you about Bristol. She got a call a couple seasons ago from the producers of Dancing with the Stars, and she was telling me about this phone call, and I said, Bristol, you know, geez, you know, we hunt, we fish, and we snow machine, and, you know, we don't dance. What did you tell these producers? And she said, exactly, Mom. She said, I told them, well, I'm not a star, and I don't dance. So sure, I'll be on Dancing with the Stars. I said, oh, Bristol, honey, you know, your last name is Palin. The critics are, it's going to be brutal. And she's like, exactly. The critics are going to criticize, the haters are going to hate anyway, so you might as well dance. I'm like, right on, what a life lesson. So you know what little Bristol did at the time? She was a teenager. Her first season of Dancing with the Stars. She made enough money to buy a house as a teenager, flip the house. She's done this 3 times now. I mean, talk about turning morning into dancing with the stars. She was so funny too, as we were talking about the logistics of how are you going to do that? You know, we were in Wasilla. How are you going to? She loaded up her truck and she moved to Beverly Hills. I said, right on, Bristol, we're going to come visit you there in Beverly Hills. She's like, oh, Mom, I don't know. You know. those weeks on the All-Star season, and they got to pick a song that they got to dance. Somebody else wasn't picking the song this time for her. She got to choose, so she chose Redneck Woman. I don't think I've ever been danced to on Dancing with the Stars. And she also got the lowest scores of the season on that one. And it's my fault because I'm going to encourage them, like, yeah, right on, that's our anthem. Yeah, it's got another chance. Get it? Yeah, they didn't get it at all. But 3 houses that a kid is in savings, enough money to send her little boy to college when he is ready to go to college. That's a smart cookie. So she's like, I'll laugh all the way through. So she teaches me too. She kind of manifests the old Irish toast that we like, Todd and I. May we always be happy and may our enemies know it. But I do encourage you to dance, to do those things that have been put in you as an interest, a passion, and then seek reward for your hard work. That's part of the American spirit too, is an expectation for reward for your hard work. We have to do that within our government too. Reining in government will go a long way towards that other huge problem that we have we must deal with, and that is our runaway debt, $16 trillion, but really it's tens of trillions of dollars when you consider pension plans that aren't funded and that are going to be due, and underfunded other liabilities out there. And the blame for this debt, it lies squarely with the permanent political class. They created it, and they ignored it, and they passed the buck on it. And as I said this afternoon, it's been 4 years since we've even had a budget passed in the federal government. You want to know why they don't pass a budget? Because they know it's not going to balance, and they don't want to see, and they don't want you to see really how bad the situation is. And want to know why Congress won't cut spending? Because there's nothing in it for them. Cutting means tough, messy choices. We had to do that up there in Alaska. It means upsetting some special interest or lobbyists who may be just ready to cut you a check for your campaign. Now, what we're doing is, with no budget, is continuing to spend and to borrow and to print. And you saw the QE2, now quantitative easing 3, and then I say, what's next? 4, 5, 6, where does it stop? I try to explain to others, you all understand the numbers, and you know what the Fed's printing presses as they're running just to print more money means. How I try to explain it, especially to groups of young people who are maybe just tuning into what's going on. I talk about, well, at the breakfast table when I have Trey, I've got a 4-year-old sitting there, and Bristol's son, they're sitting there, and they both want the last cup of milk that's sitting there, and Mom and Grandma, I didn't go to the store, so all we have is 1 cup of milk. Now, if I just try to, just kind of add some water to that milk in order to feed both kids, did I just increase the milk supply? No, I watered it down and I made it useless. And that's what the Fed is doing to our currency by just watering down our currency, printing more and more money and throw it in there. I'm trying to explain to young people how dangerous the Fed is as it continues to just print more money, dilute that currency that we have, devalue it, and it will result in inflation. But this going along to get along and not challenging what is being practiced in Washington, D.C. today, that kind of cronyism is bankrupting us, and having no budget really has real-life consequences. We saw that most dramatically last year when, remember, our country's credit rating was downgraded for the first time in our history. We've been given warning after warning that we'd be downgraded if politicians continue to ignore the problem, our massive debt and our deficit problems every year. But instead of making the real cuts that were necessary, they used Enron-like accounting gimmicks. And they promised that if we let them spend trillions more today, remember the big deal that was cut? Okay, all right, they said, if we people allow them to spend their trillions today, then they'll cut billions 10 years from now. By some magical thinking, they figured that they could run up trillion-dollar deficits year after year and still somehow avoid the unforgiving mathematics that led to a downgrade. Well, we got a rude awakening, and now it is incumbent upon us to face our debt squarely and to deal with it. The 1%. More recently, it's been the 47%. And there are some who think that, well, merely taxing that 1%, increasing taxes there, that's the solution to the debt problem. But that's not going to work. Because even if government confiscated, not just tax, confiscated it all of the income of the 1%, it would still be barely enough to fund government for just 2 months of the operating expenses. So taxing or taking more from the 1% isn't the answer, because as the saying goes, the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. Washington does not have a revenue problem. We've heard this before. Washington does have a spending problem. We have too many politicians who are addicted to opium. Opium, other people's money. And their entire careers, that is what they've been engaged in, is spending other people's money. There's some politicians there, but then I don't know if they've ever had to actually make a payroll or balance a budget, because it's always been other people's money. That's their way of thinking. So once these politicians who want to go ahead and raise taxes, well, once they raise taxes through the roof on the 1%, they'll raise them on the 47%, and essentially on 100% of Americans. And then they'll reach for things like a value-added tax and other things that perhaps some bigger people can't really see. And then what happens when all of this leads to more unemployment and more stagnation? What happens when interest rates inevitably rise? What happens when we can't afford to pay even the interest on
that will affect at this late date the outcome of the election?
Well, it should open people's eyes to what the media does as it works with this administration that is hiding something when it comes to our ambassador being killed and 3 other brave Americans being killed that night. And now all the information, as you're suggesting, coming out where there's obviously a cover-up as to what happened that night, and that it was 6 weeks ago. And the loved ones of those who were killed in this attack still don't have answers. And Americans don't have answers, and that's not right. And hopefully this opens people's eyes to see how powerful the media is when they decide to complicitly work with an administration that doesn't want to tell the truth about an issue. So hopefully people will open their eyes in these next 2 weeks before they are in that ballot box, those who aren't quite sure who to vote for yet, and they'll realize that perhaps other things that they have heard about Romney or about others that are not the chosen one of this very powerful leftist media, that they will realize, oh, perhaps there's another side of the story. They'll do their homework real quick in the next couple weeks and make a wise decision. The media is very powerful, and they have so much personally invested in Barack Obama that they will do anything to work with him to get reelected, even cover something up as tragic and important to know about as the Benghazi attack.
True. 2 years ago on this stage, I told by John McCain as vice president, and the election, especially when the lamestream press really tore into some of the best advice.
Best advice I would ever get on that campaign trail, especially any time I got to sit down and just speak with American hero John McCain and hear from his heart what it was that he had in mind to help America become prosperous and so exceptional again. So any advice there? I'll tell you a piece of fun advice I got on the campaign trail, though. It was the night of the vice presidential debate against Joe Biden, and I'm backstage in the green room getting ready to go out on stage to debate. And before any big event, you know, I got to pray because you want divine inspiration for such a thing. I've shared this story before, but I think it's hilarious. So I'm looking around for somebody to pray with in the green room on the campaign staff, and nobody looked real enthused about wanting to pray. So my little daughter Piper, she was 7 at the time, she was in the room with me. So I grabbed Piper and said, "Piper, come here, come pray with Mama. You know, for divine inspiration." But I wanted to make it easy for her to understand why would we be praying before. You know, she probably thought it was just another speech. And I said, "Well, this is, you know, a competition, it's a debate. So just pray that I win." And then I said, to make it even simpler, I said, "Piper, just pray that God just speaks right through me." And she said, "God speaking through you? That'd be cheating."
was placed in your situation to arm themselves against what's about to happen?
Well, one, don't think about 4 years from now. If you're in a position, and as Tom Irwin can testify, you know what I did as governor of Alaska, not making many friends in the legislature because I was cutting their pet projects. I made the largest veto cuts in our state's history because we had a surplus. So of course, the politicians who held the purse strings, they just wanted to spend that surplus, and it takes courage to say, no, just because we have a surplus doesn't mean that we're going to spend other people's money so recklessly today. In fact, now is the time to pay down debt and fund pension plans and other things out front, and out front fund education and give people back the money that was theirs anyway, do all that kind of thing. That's what we did, not try to maneuver for a position some years down the road. So somebody in a local office today needs to just do their job, know what they were elected to do, not wait for anybody to be patting them on the back, because people elect you to do the job, and you really shouldn't expect to have the pats on the back or anything, and not, certainly not try to maneuver yourself into some kind of position, because so much changes, there's so much volatility in politics, day to day, much less years down the road.
Okay, I only have